Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Now, as we established last week, April is National Stress Awareness Month, and we are really all about the concept of the laughter being the best medicine here. So as such, we are looking at a month full of comedy recs. Last week, we were all about stand-up comedy routines available via all of our different platforms, and this week, we're shifting focus to classic rom-coms. I love a good romantic comedy, but there's just something about the ones made in like the golden era of Hollywood that just, you can watch them over and over and over again and you just never get tired of them. And there's just something about that whole Hollywood clique, the Hepburns and, you know, the Cary Grants of the world. It just was a really specific time in filmmaking, and everything just felt like cinema magic, you know? Anyway, if you have a Milan-Berlin library card, you have access to thousands and thousands and thousands of digital options with regard to comedies, but also any genre that you could potentially look at. If you have a Milan-Berlin library card, you also have even more to select from if you are interested in DVDs and Blu-ray. So with that, I want to go ahead and jump right in to today's recs. Okay, my very first recommendation is available through our CLEVNET service, and it's on DVD and Blu-ray, and that is 1938's Bringing Up Baby. This is one of my all-time favorite films of any genre, and if you have not seen it, you 100% absolutely have to. This is just such a delightful, delightful film. So basic plot, you have this sort of very put upon paleontologist, you have a ridiculously eccentric socialite, a quest for a missing dinosaur bone, and a pet leopard named Baby. And how could you not have fantastic classic comedy gold with that conglomeration of things? Obviously you couldn't get two further apart types of personalities. This very like structured, plan it all out kind of guy with a very laissez-faire young woman, and through random and ridiculous circumstances, they just keep meeting, and you know, there's just so much wonderful ridiculousness in each scene that they're in together. David Huxley is the paleontologist. He's played by Cary Grant, and Susan Vance is the socialite, played by Katharine Hepburn. And these two, they were in a number of romantic comedies together, including Philadelphia Story, which is also extraordinary. If you've not seen it, also a must watch. But this one, there's just something absolutely madcap, crazy, screwball comedy-esque about this that I just adore. It's so ridiculous, the plot line. Again, there's a pet panther named Baby and a missing dinosaur bone. Like, these are really, like, these are actual elements in the story, and they're absolutely absurd, but somehow it really, really works. And that's one of those things about this era of Hollywood. You can throw in things that are completely outlandish, and somehow it manages to make sense in everything. I guess the suspension of disbelief, I don't know but what it is, but it just is fantastic. So this movie has an exceptional script, and what makes the script even better is the way that Grant and Hepburn play off of one another. They have phenomenal chemistry, and the dialogue is incredibly snappy. Like, yes, of course, all scripts are just words on a page, but there's something about the way these two work with this particular script that, you know, people who are fans of Amy Sherman-Palladino, like Gilmore Girls, Bunheads, things like that, if you like that kind of pacing with the language and that sort of interaction and that snappy sort of clever, witty, biting back and forth, this is absolutely what that comes from. This kind of film inspired all of the Palladinos of today. And I don't think there's really a better example of that than in Bringing Up Baby. Because it's got both like clever and witty, but like just out and out, like super chemistry ridden, and it's just fantastic. If you like romantic comedies, this is absolutely one of the best examples, I think. You've also got direction from Howard Hawks, who is famous for, say, like Rio Grande and like a lot of Western films, but also Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, His Girl Friday, I Was a Male War Bride. So you've got this guy who definitely has his niches, but they're such separate, diverse kinds of films. I mean, it's just not what I would expect anyway, I suppose, because, you know, usually you have people like Nora Ephron from like the 90s, like the late 80s and 90s. She's like the queen of romantic comedy writing. I don't see her suddenly putting out Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid on the side of it, but you know, that's what this guy does. And he does it all so well. That's the other thing. I mean, like the romantic comedies I mentioned are all absolute classics and phenomenal. So not just Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn are fantastic in this, but the entire supporting cast. And you do have some really big, familiar character performers in this that if you're a fan of classic film, you'll absolutely recognize. But even if you aren't really a big fan of classic films, this one just feels very accessible. It's not so far removed from what we watch today that you would feel the distance of it, because I will absolutely admit, some classic films do feel really dated, and if you are solely a contemporary viewer, then you might not like them. But I think this one is silly in a way that is enjoyable to people of all ages. You can watch it as a young child and enjoy it. I know that I did. I watched this with my grandparents in the 80s, and I thought it was hilarious. And the silliness factor of it really plays into that. Again, there's a pet leopard named Baby. But so like the silliness factor can appeal to a young kid, but as you get older, you recognize other things and other elements that are a little bit more beneath the surface that you wouldn't necessarily catch as a kid. And so the more you watch it and the different times in your life you watch it, the more you get out of it, in addition to it just being funny, fun, and ridiculous. So yeah, this is, again, an absolute must-watch, whether you like classic films, whether you're after really well-written dialogue, like I said, Amy Sherman Palladino fans, this is a must-watch. If you are just looking for something fun and silly that's not going to, necessarily change the way you view film, but just really entertain you, this is the way to go. So again, 1938's Bringing Up Baby, available on DVD and Blu-ray via our CLEVNET service. Must watch. Okay, next recommendation, available on Canopy, is 1959's Some Like It Hot. This is one of those movies that is in pretty much every AFI best film list style thing that you'll find out there, whether we're talking about, official critics like film experts, or you're just talking about random fans of movies. Some Like It Hot is just one of those gems that appeals to pretty much everybody. In this particular film, we've got a pair of Chicago musicians. They just happen to witness a mafia murder, and they've got to go on the run. What do they do in order to go and to sort of disappear? They decide to cross-dress as women so that they can play in an all-women's band. An all-women's band that also features a woman named Sugar, who's played by Marilyn Monroe. I mean, these things just write themselves, right? But yeah, this is one of those movies that it's just ridiculous plotline, but so much fun. In large part because of the acting. You've got Joe, who is played by Tony Curtis, Jerry played by Jack Lemmon, and as mentioned, Sugar played by Marilyn Monroe. But you've also got a whole host of other performers, including Joey Brown, who plays this sort of ridiculous millionaire who falls in love with Jerry's female persona. And there's just so much to really enjoy about this movie. And parts of it you would expect any kind of like gender bender cross-dressing film from the 50s to feel really dated pretty quick. And I'm not going to say that there aren't bits that play into old school stereotypes. There absolutely are. But somehow it remains really, really enjoyable. It's just such a laugh and such a lark to watch. The music's great. I mean, seriously, the music is a big part of this movie. But it really is the performances, particularly between the three leads, Joe, Jerry, and Sugar. It's an interesting kind of triangle that they form, where you obviously know the pair that's going to end up together, but like the silly little bits where the other person is in, it never feels threatening. It never feels overly contrived. It's just sort of there. That's how it is, you know? And the other side of the triangle ends up with their own absolutely ridiculous and fabulous storyline. But yeah, it's just delightful. Again, it's thoroughly ridiculous, like the plot line in and of itself. But it's one that I feel like you see this done all the time, the whole like trying to escape the mob, and instead of doing it in like a really heavy way or a dark way, this one has such a light, fluffy vibe to it, you know, which is an odd concept. I mean, you're dealing with the Chicago mob, a very bad mob. Not that we should have levels of mob, but like it's the Chicago mob, a fairly serious element, and that you're able to make this sort of delightful romantic comedy out of it is just fascinating to me, and it is thoroughly enjoyable all the way through. And if you do enjoy classic films and you haven't seen this one, where have you been? But two, you really do need to. This one is on all of those best of lists for a reason. I've always been a big fan of the sort of gender bender stories. Anytime you have a character that is trying to blend with, you know, a gender not their norm, especially in classic Hollywood films, I always find it really, really interesting, if nothing else, how they do it. And this one just does it very well. Very, very well. And Tony Curtis, especially as Joe, in Joe trying to navigate, is very, you know, I hesitate to use the word serious because there's nothing particularly serious about this movie, but he definitely is playing the character who's more natural about this persona that he puts on, whereas Jerry, played by Jack Lemmon, is definitely more fish out of water, but somehow also weirdly embraces it. It's, again, like so much enjoyment from so many levels, like from an academic level to just a pure love of film level. So again, if you like classic film, if you like jazz, if you like really well acted movies in particular, 100% you need to check out Some Like It Hot. Again, it's available on our Canopy digital service. Okay, final recommendation for today is available via our Hoopla digital service, and that is 1954's Sabrina. Sabrina has been remade, I believe in the 90s, with Harrison Ford and Julia Ormond in a very serviceable romantic comedy. But if you want the real, true, perfect example of this story, you definitely want to check out the original. So in the original, we are following this incredibly wealthy, powerful family, and in particular, the two brothers in it. Linus, who is the elder, played by Humphrey Bogart. He's very serious. He's very straight-laced, focused on the family business, furthering their successes and their reach. And then you've got the second brother, David. He is definitely a playboy. He's got money. He's grown up with money. He's never known a time without that sort of clout. And he's definitely a spoiled socialite who definitely enjoys being a bit of a womanizer and really revels in that life. And then comes the chauffeur's daughter, Sabrina, played by the incandescent Audrey Hepburn. I mean, she's just such an icon. And while most people think of, say, Breakfast at Tiffany's when you think of Audrey Hepburn, this one is another one that's way high on my list as far as films that are really iconic of her kind of performance. So Sabrina has grown up with this incredibly wealthy family, and she's always had a bit of a crush on David, the incredibly charming, womanizing second brother. He doesn't really have much purpose in life. He's not driven by anything aside from like his conquests. And none of that matters to her. She just sees this handsome prince, you know, I mean, like, it's definitely one of those from across the room kind of crushes where she doesn't know really anything about him other than he's handsome and he's very charming and he's nice to her, he's polite to her, and she's very pretty, right? And of course it's Audrey Hepburn, but she's also the chauffeur's daughter, and nothing's going to come of this. She ends up traveling to Paris and goes through this sort of metamorphosis, and when she comes back, she's this glamorous Parisian, like, goddess, for lack of a better word. And when David sees her, he's immediately struck by her. He insists that he's in love, and he doesn't even, Sabrina had been such a non-entity to him, he doesn't even recognize her. He just knows that this is the woman for him. And of course, this very wealthy family has no interest in having this servant's daughter take her place amongst them. So Linus takes it upon himself to put a wedge between the two lovers, and in his doing so, of course, ends up developing feelings for her as well. So you've got what's actually kind of a heavy theme of this brothers falling in love with the same woman, but it's done in such a way that it's never dark, it's never heavy, it's very clever and light and fluffy. And I think that's very much in part because the actors are playing it that way. They're not making a heavy drama. They are making a romantic comedy, and it works. It works. There's so many silly moments in this, juxtaposed with like a really rather intense romantic thread. And you know, as a contemporary viewer, there's a lot more going on to this kind of storyline, the haves and the have-nots, how wealth and power affect different kinds of relationships people might have, and how wealth and power have problems with someone from the lower class coming up. It's as an adult viewer really interesting to rewatch. I had not mentioned that David, the second son, is played by William Holden. And this movie is very interesting on a meta level when you're talking about behind the scenes. So in reality, according to tons of different sources and biographies and autobiographies, Audrey Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart, the two who end up being your primary kind of focus in this film, did not get along at all offset. They just couldn't click. And yet their chemistry is exceptional on screen, which is not always the case. When you read behind the scenes, like autobiographies and things like that, you oftentimes will hear how people hated each other, and you can definitely tell on screen that this should have been taken into consideration. But this one totally works. And reality is kind of screen gossipiness. Audrey Hepburn and William Holden ended up having a bit of a fling during this film. And it's interesting how all of those things show up on screen. You know, are we seeing two people who are actually, you know, infatuated with each other off screen, and how that translates? And it's just, again, as someone who's always had a fascination with film and the performing arts and was part of the performing arts industry, you know, I always find it interesting to see how personal thoughts, feelings, emotions will play to an audience. And I do think that that comes across in here. I really, really do. Because while Hepburn and Bogart have good chemistry, Hepburn and Holden have ridiculous chemistry. So that's just yet another element to add to when you view this film. Like, all of those different things from an academic standpoint versus just a film viewer versus a film aficionado and a film history lover. All of those different things really make this movie a fascinating watch. So yeah, if you like classic romantic comedies, but you're not looking for something like with a screwball comedy feel, if you're looking for something just maybe a little bit more romantic, a little bit more serious that still is funny, Sabrina is an absolutely excellent choice. If you're looking for really solid acting, if you're just a big fan of one of these actors, because they're all huge performers, they're really, really brilliant performers actually, then this one, you can't go wrong with it. Again, 1954 Sabrina, it's available on our Hoopla digital service. Okay, so those were my 3 big recommendations for this week's romantic comedy theme. If you happen to have any classic romantic comedy recommendations you'd like to share with us, please, please, please comment with those below. It's one of my favorite genres. I really do love classic films in general, but the rom-com from the 30s through the 60s, just the perfect time for that particular kind of film. If you have recommendations for themes you'd like to see us cover in the future, definitely comment with those too. Always looking for help with that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I love putting these lists together, and this week was an absolute delight to talk about and share. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Once more, thanks for watching, and hopefully I will see you next week. Bye-bye.